Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us here.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on investigative procedures. And you guys did a presentation at the ICA, or the virtual ICA conference. We kind of want to jump into that and expand that with all of our listeners and viewers on the Fraud Fighting podcast about, the vendor side and from the insurance side of what's changed in this past year. But first, why don't you guys give us a little background and introduction about yourselves? How long have you been in the fraud community?
Well, again, Jonathan Ayers. I'm with the Standard Insurance Company. Been with the company for the last 26 years, and sort of grew into the position of fraud fighter simply because I administered claims for 10 years, 3 years on the group side and 7 years on the individual side. And working on the individual disability claims, the investigations or the claim reviews were more in depth, more complex because they were self-employed individuals, business owners, and there's a lot of investigative techniques that I had to utilize, financial analysis, and I really enjoyed that part of the job. And when an opportunity came up within our SIU, I jumped at it, and because of the background in the individual disability side, I think that's what gave me the position. And I've been with the SIU for the last 16 years. So truly enjoy it. New challenges every day. There's always someone out there that's going to be trying something new or think they're trying something new. And being able to investigate that brings a challenge to me at my job every day. Appreciate it.
Joe, how about you?
I've been with PhotoFax 10 years. It's actually my first job out of college. Went to Penn State, did pre-law, didn't really know where to go from there. And I just kind of somehow connected with our recruiter. Started off doing surveillance in the van, worked my way from Pennsylvania down to Alabama and back, promoted to a case manager, and then eventually senior manager, and just kind of similar, just grew into the role working with LTD clients just from a lot of relationships with them, and have been doing that the last 7 or 8 years, and had the opportunity to join the ICA last year, and it was my first year on the disability committee as well. So it's been interesting, and I can't wait to go over what we're going to talk about over the last 8 months of COVID, because on both sides of the coin here, we definitely have experienced a lot of changes.
So recently the two of you did a joint presentation at the virtual ICA conference. How was that, doing it virtually instead of in person like we're so used to doing?
Well, it was different. Obviously the number of options to attend were decreased. Opportunities to network with other individuals was absent, other than through virtual. But the meet and greets during the conferences, the dinners, breakfast, that type of stuff. I think that's a valuable aspect of attending a conference, is being able to meet people within the industry, meet connections, stuff like that. So that was absent, but the content itself of the conference was still on spot. We covered some good aspects that I think the industry needs to hear and learn more about.
Yeah, I agree. It was really well done. We weren't too sure. I mean, maybe a month and ahead of time, it just decided it was switching over to virtual a little bit more than a month. And everybody did a fantastic job of getting it together. We had been preparing all year for what we were going to do regardless. Our presentation, Jonathan and I and Jason Gallant and Robert Lesko, we totally changed at that point once we found out it was going to be virtual. And we thought, wow, why not discuss COVID, and how it's affected us. And the audience had a lot of great feedback. All of the other presentations were awesome, like you mentioned, spot on. There weren't technical difficulties. The ICA was great at doing a walkthrough with us beforehand, making sure everything went smoothly during, and questions, you could raise your hand on Zoom and things like that. It was cool. There was a lot of good feedback. still getting emails from folks saying, you guys did a great job, awesome information, questions, could we utilize those slides for our training? So I think it went off great for a first time virtual, and they really hit it out of the park.
So Jonathan, how has COVID-19 impacted claims handling and investigations for long-term disability carriers?
Well, it presented us with some challenges. When there was the nationwide lockdown, it was difficult obtaining medical records from small clinics and independent physicians. I think office-based businesses, office-based carriers, where majority of the employees were working in an office, such as ours, we had to make the quick transition from in-office to remote workers. And fortunately, we had transferred to Teams about a year earlier, so we become very familiar with that already. We utilize that for communication and virtual meetings. It's been very, very helpful that way. So I think as a company, we've transitioned quite well. The claims administration side, I think they've faced some challenges, obviously. Changing the work environment again from in office to remote was a big change for some. But I think we're all falling into place and making that a little bit more comfortable. The company itself made a great contribution, allowing us to purchase office equipment for our home office. So that was awesome.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was. And with regards to claims investigations, we utilize face-to-face interviews to help clarify matters, just get some information that's not available through the medical records, and gather information that's not, readily available through telephone conversations. We use face-to-face interviews to see how the claimant ambulates within their house. Is there any business indications, home-based businesses? Is there ambulatory devices like canes and walkers, and do they look used? So when we were not able to utilize those face-to-face interviews, we're missing out on those opportunities to see that those aspects. But since then we've turned to virtual interviews, and that has its pros on itself. We're able to utilize a very skilled interviewer for our interviews throughout the entire United States. She understands our product. She understands what we're looking for. The interviews are video recorded, so we're able to see the claimant and the reactions to specific questions and how they present themselves. So there is positives in that. So surveillances, when the lockdown was down, people were active. People were still active outside their home.
More active than I've seen in a long time. People are like, yeah, I'm going to go running every day.
Yeah. I would say, we may not capture anything because of the lockdown, but then we'd send someone out there and observe some individuals, and boy, were they more active than we anticipated. Neighborhood walks and bike rides and stuff like that. We missed out on those opportunities where we thought the claimant might have been working, but because the businesses were closed, we weren't able to verify, the presence or absence of work activity. But physical activity itself was I think heightened near the home, so that was helpful. So
yeah.
What are some of the cons, though? Because you were talking about the pros. So what are some of the cons that you ran into on your end with just the interviews and stuff like that?
Well, the cons of the virtual interview?
Yeah. I mean, were there any, because the pros, we could record it and you've got a really talented investigator handling the investigations, but are there any cons that you've experienced?
Well, we're not able to see if there's any home-based businesses being run out of the home. We're not able to see the claimant ambulate out of the chair and go get their prescription medications and see how they get out of their chair. Is there any indications of pain? Are they able to sit for extended periods of time? We may be able to capture that through the video capture of it, but we're not able to see The ambulatory devices, the canes, do they look worn? Or do they look used? Are they shoved in the back of a closet, or are they, sitting right there at the front door? Is there any signage on vehicles outside in the driveway indicating a possible business? So we're missing that through the virtual interviews.
That's funny you mentioned that, and we just had a case. We've been doing quite a few of, and John's right, the virtual visits. Now, your most experienced investigator can handle every one, because a lot of the times the most difficult part is the scheduling and the travel involved to get someone to the claimant's house. And now you can have any investigator anywhere handle any investigation. Also helps where the attorneys and interpreters can be on the line. So, you're getting and the ability to record, which in the past many times was either just audio or the report submitted by the individual conducting the interview. Now you can have securely recorded video for the analysts to review, medical providers to review, and that's been huge. Another thing we've been doing to kind of help with that is surveillance in conjunction with the virtual visit. So, and why I was laughing is we just had one where we did it, and the claimant's vehicle had masks and then their phone number listed to call for, which he's exactly right. If we were on site, we would have seen that, but you wouldn't see that out, on the virtual medium, because that's parked outside our house. So that's kind of another cool way to see what's going on and to confirm or deny maybe the information that they're saying. If they indicate they're using an ambulatory device, but earlier in the day or later they're not, or they are, that's pretty interesting information. But we've seen, and Jonathan actually pulled a bunch of carriers at the beginning of COVID when we did our presentation, and it seemed like the only consensus was kind of uncertainty on how to move forward, because these field visits are extremely important. It's just a wealth of knowledge, and most were shifting to the virtual medium. I think by now most have, but some still didn't know. Some were still sending individuals to the residence, pick or choose here and there, or their own employees. So, there's some huge liability there if you're sending an investigator or one of your own individuals to someone's residence still. So I think COVID's going to come and go, and even when it goes, I think the virtual visit will probably be something that's still an option, because just with the cost savings and the pros Jonathan mentioned, I think that's going to be something that was kind of created through COVID out of necessity, and I think that's just going to remain for probably perpetuity.
So, Joe, how has COVID-19 impacted investigations from a vendor perspective, being a manager and having to manage everything?
Well, it's been interesting. It was something that none of us have experienced. So it was a lot of anxiety at the beginning, but like Jonathan mentioned, claimants were so more active than we even anticipated, where it kind of became, should we do surveillance versus let's keep going? The home projects have picked up a lot. Home Depot Lowe's stock surging through the roof. People are doing so much at their house because they're home. And, we, in our presentation, we talked about unmanned surveillance and the benefit of that, where we're getting kind of unheard of film totals and activity levels just because there's so much going on at the house. And these unmanned surveillance units can film everything at the house for 5, 6, 7 days, 24 hours across the clock. So it's kind of been the best bang for your buck and getting all sorts of results. Some clients have asked, what's changed for you? And, of course, agents have PPE. They also have their social distancing if their claimant's going in anywhere. A lot to remember, too, is every part of the country has kind of been handling this differently. So many of us are near the big cities. However, you go an hour or two out, they might not even be wearing masks. Bars are open, restaurants are open, gyms are. I go to the gym every morning still. It's totally different. So that's why a big thing is kind of communication with your vendor. They have boots on the ground, so they kind of know the situation where your claimant lives. So I think through this pandemic, it's kind of brought the vendor-client relationship even stronger, because you really need to trust their investigators and knowledge on what's going on where your claimant lives, because it may not necessarily have an impact at all on the investigation. because there may not even be lockdowns.
Yeah, I agree with Joe that communicating with the investigative firm is important, more so during this pandemic. Being out here in the Portland, Oregon area, our governor's been quite well in keeping things locked down, just to help contain the pandemic as best as she can. I went back to Eastern Washington to visit my mother-in-law, and Washington's the same way. But we crossed the river into Idaho, and there were no restrictions, no masks. There was no social distancing. The restaurants were packed. The bars were packed. So communicating that with inquiring with the vendor, hey, what are things doing? How are they in that area? What restrictions are in place, can help me as the carrier understand, yeah, it might be a good idea to go ahead and do surveillance. Businesses are open, activities is high. So yeah, communicating with the vendor and knowing what's going on in the various areas within the United States is very important.
Yeah, one thing folks I've consulted with and made recommendations, I said, bring it back to the basics. That's where the desktop investigation, boom, paramount, because not only is everybody posting everything, not only their opinions, what they're doing with the election, there's been protesting with the lockdowns, they're online at levels of an all-time high. There's also what we call almost like self-inflicted surveillance with the TikTok, Twitch, Instagram Reels, Facebook Live, where they're almost surveilling themselves, posting this stuff on the internet. You got to preserve that stuff before it's gone forever. And, on that topic, don't just go start clicking everything, whether you vend it out or internally investigate. There are websites where it'll notify that they're looking. So, Instagram Reels, LinkedIn, Snapchat, it'll immediately notify them somebody's looking at their page, might even email them that this individual looked at their page. And with Facebook and stuff too, you may soon pop up as a suggested friend all of a sudden because you're looking at their page. So while the online investigation is super important, be extremely careful, because it could definitely kind of alert the individual that they're being investigated. And at no question, never, ever, ever friend somebody. If their stuff's private, it's private. Don't ever friend them. And I also suggest kind of keep an eye on the social media, because just because they posted something, they may post again, or maybe they don't have much on there, but in the next week or two, there might be something added. So it never hurts to do like a social network monitoring investigation where you kind of very low cost keep an eye on all of their social media friends, relatives, and see if anything's being tagged, any videos are being posted. And again, always preserve them, save them, because that could be surveillance right there where, you may not even have to go out on site because you've got them putting it online for you.
Yeah, social media has been great during this time. It seems like there's been an uptick in use of social media. As Joe portrayed it, self-surveillance, great tools. And unfortunately, during this period of pandemic where we're using social media maybe more, Facebook is making changes, so that's preventing us from capturing everything that we need. I don't know if everybody's experiencing this, but we're experiencing it. We're only able to capture the first 4 pages of Facebook. So utilize a vendor, communicate with your vendor and their social media investigations, what type of tools they may be able to have to capture more of the Facebook profile. Another use of vendors out there.
And one last thing on that, sometimes even if it's not on social media, there might be something there, like the business with the masks posted on the side of the car. Things like Uber Eats, Lyft, Postmates, depending on the area you live, that's skyrocketing. Instacart, it's these high demand jobs where, claimants can pick up additional income, and they're doing these high volume hirings where that might not be something that's posted online. They might not be advertising that they're doing this. That might not be on their LinkedIn page. It might be what we call the quote side hustle. So sometimes even if there's just not much going on, online, there could be a whole lot, a totally different scenario when you get on site and see what they're up to. Because we've been seeing that a lot too with, these online commerce, crafting, eBay, Pinterest, and then like I mentioned, the Grubhub, Uber Eats, things like that. A lot of people are trying to generate additional income because the opportunities, they're there.
So all these changes that have been happening with investigations on both sides, on the carrier and for a vendor, are these changes here for the long haul, or do you think things will start going back to normal, or are you going to adopt some for the future?
Well, I think that we're going to, as a carrier, adopt some of the stuff that has come out because of the pandemic. I think we've become efficient utilizing the virtual meetings. We are recognizing, in Portland, Oregon, we don't have the same the population that's familiar with working in insurance as it is out on the East Coast. So moving to this remote employee environment is enabling us to recognize that, hey, we can utilize these remote employees that have the experiences that's available out on the East Coast, New England area. And so I think that's one of the things that's come out from this, is that we're going to be able to expand our population of job candidates. We're going to be able to continue to use the virtual interviews, as Joe indicated, in the cons or the pros and cons that I discussed. I think that's going to be an important tool that'll continue. As longer the pandemic occurs, I think the more drastic the changes are going to happen. A lot of businesses here in Portland, particularly the restaurant scene, has been hit hard. And those that have been able to survive have been able to do so by utilizing outdoor seating. Well, Portland, Oregon comes around at this time, it's the rainy season. So our restaurants and similar business is going to be able to continue with that. And that impacts the opportunities for individuals that are on claim to go out and find jobs. Are they going to decide, hey, there's nothing out here, I need to continue to remain on disability for my own financial security? So the longer that the pandemic is ongoing, I think that the changes, the impacts of the pandemic are going to be greater.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I mean, vendors, whether it's small, large, national firm, we had no option other than to adapt. And I honestly think everybody's going to come out of this with new skills, new appreciation for the basics. And COVID may end, but there's a whole wave of potentially these STD claims now transferring over to LTD, now that you have the long-term effects of COVID with breathing issues, things like that, fatigue. So that's going to be a whole new wave. And we don't know how long this is going to go on for. So I think it's going to create its own almost subcategory. And like Jonathan mentioned, some people have to change industries now. Occupations may not exist in that area anymore. And what we've been seeing a lot of recently is a lot of health professionals and dentists where maybe their income is impacted by smaller office hours, but there's these questionable disability claims now where maybe it's more of them getting that income back as opposed to, just not having the same amount of customers as they would in the past. So we've been seeing that a lot, where maybe their office hours are only 8 to 4, but they're golfing beforehand or after, things like that. So we've seen a whole just different block of what we do, and have had to adapt what we've already done for that reason. So it's been interesting to say the least. And I think we've all learned a whole lot that's going to carry over whether COVID goes away or not. And also, like Jonathan mentioned, just the work from home capabilities for us, our office staff, adapted to that immediately. There's been no issues, hitches, things like this, Zoom and other Microsoft Teams make the ability to still have that relationship. Because I know a lot of friends in the industry in the beginning, they were worried about, losing that camaraderie in the office and talking about claims. But now, I mean, we're in 3 different parts of the country and we're all talking to each other right now. So I think technology has really helped bring everybody together and kind of grow out of this as well.
What does the future look like for the ICA and similar organizations?
That's going to be interesting to see. The ICA is a great resource available to the carriers, and I believe that majority of their revenues come from these face-to-face conferences, and hopefully we're able to attend the face-to-face conference coming up later in late 2021. If not, I think we're going to be seeing continued virtual conferences. They're going to be more reliant on volunteers such as Joe and myself with some of the duties carrying out these conferences and education opportunities. It's going to be really interesting to see how this goes, again, judging on how long the pandemic is going to continue.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We were all excited to go to New Orleans last year. And to be honest, if this year we don't go back to in person, I have full confidence in the ICA to handle the virtual. Maybe we can reach a broader audience, people that maybe couldn't come because of scheduling conflicts. Maybe they'll adapt some combination of the technology where it's in person but can also be broadcast as it was this year for individuals at home that can't afford to travel there or leave work for a few days. You can attend the session that you'd like. So we really, really hope it goes back, because you can't beat just meeting someone in person, networking, things like that. But I think the ICA will continue to adapt. It's only been a little over a year for me, but what I've seen, it's just such bright minds, and I think they'll be able to figure out ways to just keep with it and make sure that it's still extremely valuable and everybody's getting out of it what they need.
Do you guys have any additional statements or anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
I just think it's going to be interesting to see how this pandemic continues. Right now, we're seeing the numbers increase. So we're going to see how businesses are impacted and the long term of those impacts. Our long-term disability, our revenues are based on payroll. And so when payroll decreases, our revenue decreases. Also, when unemployment increases, there tends to be an increase in claims. So there's going to be some opportunities for us in the SIU to weed out those legitimate claims. Hey, we're here to pay those claims that we fully intend to, or that merit payment. But there's going to be a small population there that's also going to want to be taking advantage of the situation. And I think it's just going to only increase the work efforts by myself and Joe here coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride. When I started in this industry, 2010, it was right after our recession, and claims were surging. And I think Jonathan's right. The unemployment rate has a direct impact on that. And sure, there's claims that are legitimate. We're not questioning that, but there's always that percentage of fraudsters as well. There's always a situation that can be taken advantage of. And that kind of, I think, is going to increase, whether it's volume or claim activity. And if it's anything like COVID was this year, we've kind of proven that even with lockdowns and restrictions, people still need to be human and they're active and their kids are home. So that's more on their plate. Their spouse, that's usually gone 40 hours a week. They're there all week. So it's a lot going on at the houses. And, I think there's always going to be a need for what we all do on this. And, kind of excited to see where 2021 takes us.
It'll definitely be interesting. I'm not really sure where it's going. It seems like we're kind of going back up on the roller coaster, and we'll
Yeah.
see. The Coalition Against Insurance Fraud is predicting a lot of fraud coming up in 2021. They think in a few months here, we're going to really see an uptick in it. So it'll be definitely interesting to see how it all plays out. I appreciate you guys joining us for the podcast. So maybe we'll touch base in a couple months when things start slowing down, and we can see if the uptick in fraud actually happened and what changes have happened in 6 months. I mean, if you think about it, in the past 9 or 8 months, how much things have changed in another 6 months, who knows where we'll be.
Yeah. I mean, March to when we presented in September was so different. And even from then till now, it's different. So yeah, maybe we'll have to do part 2 of this. And
Yeah, we might have to.
Keep
But,
a real documentation of what's going on.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining me. And I appreciate you guys taking the time. And hopefully our viewers find this beneficial and interesting. And I'll let you know if they have any questions. So you guys have a great day.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, you as well. Thanks, guys.
We'll talk soon.
Take care.